Now that you know what data and system ownership is, how do you go about performing the next step? How do you identify the data and system owners within your environment? In a nutshell, there are two simple methods. Manually, by combing through lots of data about the systems and data itself, as well as its usage, as well as dynamically. By dynamically, the analysis process is still essentially the same. However, it is not nearly as time-consuming to maintain the effort long-term, as it is not human beings that are performing the analysis, but you're essentially leveraging technology to improve your processes. So manually, let's dig into that a little further. Tactically, it'll work just fine, but not strategically, or in other words, long-term. There is a significant value that can be gained by successfully identifying data and system owners, regardless if it's done manually or not. But it does not scale well within the organization as it grows. It is much more difficult to maintain accurate records, which is why it is extremely difficult for enterprises to take this approach long term. If dynamic is not an option for an enterprise, it is common for those enterprises to perform the manual effort on a recurring basis, which leads to inaccurate data between the last time the identification was performed until the next time it's performed. Ultimately, this is not an optimal approach. The preferred approach would be to dynamically perform this process, which takes a lot less long-term from a human capital standpoint, as technology is leveraged for the organization to help maintain the data and system ownership information, which does require investment to get off the ground and maintained, such as the necessary infrastructure, applications, configuration, and the daily maintenance of the technology's activities to maintain data and system ownership information. This approach is effective regardless of the scale of the organization. However, there is effort needed to ensure that the supporting infrastructure and resources to perform these tasks scales at the right speed to keep pace with the organization. The con that typically prevents organizations with limited resources, as all organizations are, from moving forward is that the approach appears to be simply more expensive and more complex than the manual method versus the return on investment. Depending on the regulatory burden of your industry or the sensitivity of your organization's data and systems, this could very well be the same conclusion that your organization comes to, whether or not to dynamically maintain data and system ownership.